Hi everyone, I'm just setting up the stream, so bear with me a couple moments. Just testing a couple parameters as we get going. While we're waiting for a couple people to jump on, just wanted to mention to you that if you're happy to share your chat with us, the program I'm beta testing for our live masterclasses is called Restream. And those of you joining from Facebook, if you want me to be able to bring your comment on screen, share it with others, and make sure it gets covered, do give that permission. It's Facebook has never been the best on privacy, but this is really limited to the purpose of just this stream. And I posted that link in the Facebook group. I am tremendously excited to get going today because this is a session that's going to cover a topic many of you deal with. Nobody feels like they have enough time. I mean, how many of you wish you had more than 24 hours in a day? That would just solve everything. You could get everything done. You could nail your PhD without hurting your relationships, still manage to be super fit in the gym, and get a good night's sleep. I remember when I was in grad school, I was often told you can have two of the three things. It was the evil triangle. You can either have friends and a social life, you can have sleep, or you can really do well in your career. And it really felt true that I just always felt, and even today, I just feel like one of the biggest poverties I suffer is a poverty of time. So today, we've got a session on peak productivity. It's going to build on some previous sessions we've done. I'm really excited about it. And we're going to dig deep into how you can optimize the hours in a day that you have. But we've got new members in the group, so a special warm welcome to those of you who are joining us. Always fantastic to have you with us. And I just want to, for those of you who don't know me well, my name's David Stuckler. I'm a professor at University of Bocconi in Milan. And my grad journey started from a very small school in Texas. None of my parents had ever gone to grad school. I really struggled. I flunked out my first semester, nearly dropped out. And it was only when I got access to support and mentorship that I was able to avoid some of the many mistakes that I see grads so commonly fall into and accelerate, publish papers, go on to Yale, and become a full professor at Oxford by the time I was 30. And I set up Fast Track Grad to help you avoid some of these common pitfalls that I fell into. And maybe some of you are feeling good, but also don't feel like you're getting the right support that you need to really be your best. And that's why I created this open access community that I want to take what I've learned and not just share it like I've done with my students who I've taught at Harvard and Oxford over the years, and now here at Bocconi Milan. But I really want to democratize that and make it open access. And this is a powerful community to connect, network with others, and also collectively troubleshoot some of your challenges. So really take advantage of the many resources. If you haven't seen it already, in the guide section, you're going to find a lot of valuable trainings that's going to help you in your writing, help you to see data better. It's going to help you learn basic skills that you definitely need if you don't already, like using a reference manager. And do DM me, get in touch with me, so that I can also help connect you to the right resources for what you may be struggling with in your grad journey. So with that, let's dive in. So those of you who are struggling with time or feel like you're always backpedaling, like you always have this mountain of work and you kind of climb up the mountain and you feel like the mountain just keeps growing bigger. I mean, if some of you guys can relate to that, let me know in the chat, because I know this feeling of this abominable mountain that just seems to grow and grow. And the more I think I'm climbing, the more it seems to escape from me. And this is a very common feeling in grad school, especially if you're working on a thesis or a dissertation, where the results, the fruits of all that hard work, you don't see for a long time. That end is sometimes not really clearly defined, not in sight. And if you don't manage this right, it can put you on a path towards feeling burnt out, feeling hopeless. And the truth is that more than 1 in 3 people who start a PhD or even their master's don't finish. And that's a terrible loss on a big investment and sacrifice you're making to really invest in your education. So we want to make sure you do all the right things. Now, in terms of your time, you really have two main options to try to boost your productivity. And one of those routes, and somebody helpfully says here, sometimes I feel like Sisyphus. Exactly. That's completely the Greek analogy. I'm just going to pop this on the screen. That's completely the Greek analogy. For those of you guys who don't know Sisyphus, it's a parable of hell where effectively somebody every day just pushes a big rock up the hill and labors all day to push this massive boulder up a hill, and then wakes up the next morning and the boulder's rolled right back down where it started. So thanks for sharing that with us. I think that is a feeling that many people in this group can relate to. And I know some of you are watching later. So if you are on our team replay watching after, comment below replay, let us know, send any questions you've got, and I'll make sure to cover those. So, to deal with this Sisyphean problem that hopefully mentioned to us, you've got two main approaches. And one is you can find a way to free up more time. You can make a clear time budget. You can use a system that I use with some of my students called the XDS system, where XDS really stands for one of the three tools you have to free up time. You can either cut the X. You can Maria thought Sisyphus was pretty funny. You can cut X. D, you can delegate. Or S, you can try to create a system to try to automate some tasks. The problem is in grad school, it's really hard for you to delegate stuff out. I mean, it would be amazing to have a research assistant, but oftentimes in grad school, you're doing this for the first time so that one day you can have research assistants. So that's often not the easiest or best option. Systems is one thing you can try to get in place, and that's where things like having a reference manager and some of the indispensable tools you'll find in the group will help you, because those systems will automate some tasks that many students spend way too much time on. And cut, there's some ways that you can actually cut in some of your tasks, like reading more effectively. We have great training on that, making sure you're reading in the right way so you don't spend hours wrestling with articles that maybe you don't even have to wrestle with, or digging into highly specialized complex material that you don't need to go into to get the meaning you want. But that's really not what this training is about. This training is about, in the time that you already have, the time that you are already allocating to your work, how can you begin to make the most of that? And I think one of the ways to really share with you the way I think of productivity is to draw a picture. So some of you guys will know from a training we did on the architecture of your perfect day that I like to structure my day into blocks. And really, you can think of your day as having four main blocks in which you've got to get your work done. And I really recommend students to set a sustainable and realistic pace, and to try to use two of those four blocks for getting deep work done, or making really substantial progress on the things you have to do as a grad or postdoc or professor or whatever you're doing in life to really succeed. You might be able to leverage a third block or even the fourth block. I've done that with my backs really against the wall, maybe a big deadline on a project for a proposal or application, but that's not sustainable and can put you on a bad path. So I want to think about how you structure one of your existing blocks, and you'll know from this before that the way I think about your blocks is that you have maybe two blocks, that each of these blocks are going to be between about 2 to 3 hours in time, and you really want to budget your time schedule to protect these blocks, because this is going to be the meat of your productivity. This is where you're going to get your deep work done. Now, if you look at a lot of people in their blocks, when get into the office or lab or wherever you're going to be, or coffee shop, wherever you're going to be working, if you can imagine, if we have a graph here that let's say here's the time, you're blocked to 2 hours, and on the other side here, let's make a graph, and let's say this is our P for productivity. A lot of people get in this block, and their productivity looks something like this. So they're kind of trying to get in the groove. Something happens, and then maybe they get distraction. They're kind of going. They're just feeling good. Something happens again. They get kicked back and bump along, kind of hard to get back into it. Go. And then another shock. Something happens, get interrupted. And then literally, about 2 to 3 hours have gone. And if you think about the actual work, the deep focused work and productivity that gets done, you've kind of imagined this area under the curve of the actual productivity getting done, If you could imagine, this is me trying to color on the computer. It's not working very well. But if you could imagine this area under the curve, you actually end up looking at this, and maybe you only got out of this block, maybe you only got 15 minutes of real deep work done on the things that you need to do. Where wouldn't it be so much nicer if you could have a curve that would be the same curve if you could draw a curve like this, and this curve instead started to look like a phase of getting into it, and your ideal curve looks something like this, where you kind of have a smooth ride, and then as you come out towards the end of your block, things slow down and you transition to your next stack. So now if you look at this, and I could kind of scribble again the area under the curve here, now you're never going to get in your block a full 2 to 3 hours. I don't know anybody who can consistently do that, but maybe in this case, your curve is going to look more like maybe you got a good 90 minutes here instead out of that same time investment. And I think for a lot of you who maybe have to balance family considerations and relationships, you might be working a job, you might be doing grad school part-time, or you might be trying to do it full-time in addition to another full-time job. I know several students in that position, especially those self-funding. You can leverage a huge gain in your life if you can just figure out how to get your productivity curve to look more like this on the right. And to do that, if any of you guys have had this feeling of productivity, again, let us know in the chat, because I know this curve, you probably see it. There's some people who always seem to just breeze through, and it's almost like they're barely in the office. They almost seem to be barely working, but they get a ton of stuff done. How do they do it? Where other people who are working long hours, it might be the first day and last to leave, and still not getting a lot done, where some people breeze through. And this really has to do with being able to get in this peak productivity effectively. And I want you guys to really reflect and think about your productivity curve, which looks more and better describes you. And most of you guys are probably not, these are obviously two extremes, one to the other. But the aspiration is, right, in the time that you do have in these main blocks that you want to protect for your work, that we want to try to get as close to this kind of structure of productivity as possible. So how do you do that? We need to first identify some of the common pitfalls. And I think the way to think of a productivity curve is really to break it into a few chunks, right? One is this first lead-in phase. All right, so this is our first chunk that we need to optimize. And then when you really get into the second chunk, which is kind of like what I call the flow, that's really important. This is your second chunk. That's really key. And then this kind of outward phase as you're transitioning onto your next thing, and also keeping a good eye on things, this is a third phase. And there's really some important things that you need to do at each of these phases to make sure you're really, really 100% doing your best. And let me just turn the sound off here because that's reverberating back. The things you need to do in each of these blocks to do your best. So your first block, think about your first part when you first arrive and you're trying to get in the flow. One of the things that's amazingly helpful is the power of routine. A lot of athletes develop things and they feel like they say, oh, I could do this in my sleep. I've done it so many times. And the way to get in a good flow and a routine is almost to develop muscle memory. If you can prime yourself to say, okay, I have a ritual, like my pregame ritual before matchup, you are priming your mind and your body to be ready to get into deep work. It's like you'll often see runners right before they're going to do a sprint. They shake their legs in the same way every time. They do some things to get themselves the right kind of stretch, but they do the same thing every time because they're getting themselves ready for peak productivity, to peak flow. And peak productivity, again, is not in this first block. This first little phase in stage is getting ready for peak flow. Now, what a lot of people do, a lot of people don't have a routine. Maybe their blocks are at inconsistent times, inconsistent places, inconsistent periods. And this can really hurt your productivity. This can really slow you down. So I want you to think, this block of 2 to 3 hours, if you get this right, can save you so much time because you can, in this simple example, you quadruple your work for the same amount of your time invested. And if you do that right, you have more time for the gym, to take care of yourself, nurture yourself, so you're feeling good again in the future. And again, this is not something we're really taught about or trained. We're just kind of supposed to figure it out. But it's vitally important. I'm telling you, you get this right, and you will. It's incredible how liberated you feel, and you feel like you get your life back. So really, this first part, you need to get yourself a ritual. And I don't want to prescribe any ritual. What works for me is, I know, for example, my main block in the morning where I like to do my deepest work that I try to protect. I often haven't. I walk into work. I have an espresso. I make sure I've gone to the bathroom, and I get in my office and everything's shut off. I try to stop myself from having any distraction whatsoever at all. And in fact, if I could sit in an almost empty room with no stimulus whatsoever, that would probably be the best thing possible. I've now trained myself to where I can block out stimulus. But for some of you guys at the beginning trying to get into this, you might need to do things to block out stimulus, because that really leads us into step 2. Because what then happens is, people in the curve over here, is they start going, and maybe they get a slower start than they could. But they start going, and then something happens, right? You can see this here. Something happens that throws you off. Somebody knocks at the door. Maybe you get a phone call. Maybe you kind of, something starts to get difficult. Oh, I forgot to do the laundry. Or, oh, I got to do this or that. And maybe you start checking social media. And little do you know, you've completely set back your flow. And the thing is, when you're in the flow, the amount of work you're getting, when you get to this flow, the amount of work you're getting done is so much greater per minute, per unit of time, than when you're down here and you never got into flow in the first place. You're not really able to get this deep work done that really starts multiplying your productivity on what you have to do. And you'd be amazed. I mean, I see when they get into this peak flow, they can write. They didn't even know it was possible. I've had students who were scared, like, how am I going to write this paper and in the time I have? But by engineering getting this deep flow, it's like, wow, I could never believe I could do it. I had one who suffers, has dyslexia. She's like, I can't believe it. I wrote like 1,500 words in just less than half a day. I wrote half my paper in half a day because I was able to get into this peak flow. Somebody has just posted one of the things that's happening, and I'm really glad you mentioned this. Procrastination is often a result of anxiety. Yeah, absolutely. So what's going to happen? The moment things get hard, right in this space, right? It's bad enough. You got the phone ringing, things in the back of your mind that are popping in, that things get hard, and your mind, when something's hard, is going to start pulling you into anything else. It's like this, you're walking into uncomfortable territory. It doesn't feel good. You start to feel anxious and stressed, and your mind is looking for any excuse to do anything else. So for those of you who are in that, there are a few things. There's a separate thing on what to do to address anxiety and those sides. It's a really important conversation that I want to have, but I want to just focus on this part right here. What I strongly suggest you do, if you've done your pre-productivity ritual right and done the things that you're going to see in the architecture of the perfect day, you've actually been able to mentally compartmentalize and say, okay, the laundry, all these other things I had to do, they're over there, they're to the side. And ideally, you want to turn off your phone, shut off social media, and if you could, hypothetically, lock yourself away from any other stimulus. If you know that there's going to be this temptation, because you know things are going to get hard, that is going to just kind of pull you away. And just, you guys may know in yourselves that this happens. This just happens. So you need to get off social media, 100%. I always put my phone on silent. I like to flip it upside down and put it far out of sight, out of mind. And I really try to protect this block so that my people aren't coming to me in this time. I don't have any appointment schedule, because I know if I don't get this block and I don't protect this block in my life, I'm not going to get deep work done. I'm not going to make real progress in climbing up that mountain, and I'm going to feel like Sisyphus. So it's hugely important. So that's really the key thing in block 2, is to make yourself indistractable. And this is going to take practice. right? Maybe some of us, we have actually been trained by society to have very low attention spans. In a way, this is attention training. If you listen to, for example, music from 3 decades ago, I like a lot of classic rock, the songs last 7 minutes. Now, if you look at the average length of a song is about 2 minutes. If you look at the music videos from 3 decades ago, they were just a band playing. Now, MTV has engineered everything to have something flashing on the screen every couple of seconds. Just as a society, we're being programmed and trained and hit with constant stimulus. And what we're doing subconsciously, we're training ourselves to have very short attention spans. And you actually need to do the opposite to get into your peak flow. You need to start training your mental muscles, training your attention span abilities to last longer and endure and overcome when you start feeling this stretch that it's getting hard, and set up your environment to where you have the muscle memory and you don't have that competing stimulus that's going to take you away from it. And trust me, you're going to feel so good after a block like this that I know many students, if they can get this really good segment of deep work done in here, that they actually don't need to do a second block in the day. It's really incredible how much time you can win back in your life by getting this right and actively training it. The last thing is then sometimes what I see, a pitfall actually comes with this curve. Sometimes students feeling really good. Oh, I'm in the peak flow. I'm doing great. I'm just going to keep going. And then they do things. They forget to eat. They forget to take care of themselves. And then life around them starts crashing down. It's almost like they went down a rabbit hole and they went from one extreme to the other. You do need to watch yourself and phase out, because some students, they get this and it feels like a superpower to be able to get in this flow. But taken to an extreme, it's not sustainable. You want a realistic pace. And I guarantee you, for finishing your PhD, your thesis, a research paper, just even getting this productive space and capacity of 90 minutes a day will change your life. I got a point here. I want to take questions as they come in. My challenge is saying no when supervisors try to pull me into endless meetings because they value my perspective. That's really hard, especially when you're starting out, because you want to satisfy your supervisors. They're writing you reference letters. Thanks, Tyrone. Thanks for sharing that with us. There's real power in saying no, and I know it's incredibly hard as a graduate student. And one thing that I often will say to those supervisors, they'll know I'm working on a paper, and maybe they're going to be a co-author in that paper and say, look, I want to, but if I go to this meeting, I really need to try to get this paper done to publish. So I tried to spin that saying no into something that will equally benefit my supervisors or others who are pulling me away. And there's definitely a gendered dimension on this. There have been some studies done that often find that women in academia tend to have a much more difficult time saying no, and get pulled into things that don't add value to their careers and getting them ahead. Maybe they're happy to contribute to the community and others, but generally, at least this block of 2 to 3 hours, you need to get your elbows out and protect it as much as possible. Because if you don't get this is where you're investing in yourself and your career and your long-term productivity. Sometimes we get pulled so easily into just fighting fires and triage. Part of this is just not getting in a reactive mode and being on the back foot and really trying to get out in front and save this block. So I always make sure, no matter how busy I get, I keep this block of time for myself, because if I don't, other things are going to start to suffer. So thanks for sharing with that. I think that is an incredibly common feeling, Tyrone, that you've talked about. And so coming out of this phase here, during this, this is when maybe as you're coming out, then you can start thinking about other essential things. Now you can come back, think about social media, phase out, thinking about, if you're going to do email and other things. And like I said, don't overdo it, because if you keep trying to extend this curve after 2 to 3 hours, you're going to suffer. I mean, it's you're going to lose weight, you're going to get tired, you're going to be drained, and you're actually eating your future. You're taking away from your next block. So inside this block, make sure you have a cap. Now, how can you go about starting this process to improve? Well, what some of my students have had success with is really focusing on this time, and they kind of realized, and it was kind of eye-opening for them, that once they shut out all the stimulus, they felt how much their mind was wandering to other things, and almost felt agitated in their chair. Like they couldn't sit still. They needed to do something. Their mind kept wanting to wander. So what I recommend, this is something you're going to have to train, because for decades, you've probably trained low attention span inadvertently, because that's just the norm of society. So what I suggest you do here is some tips are, people say, get in and set a timer and just aim. You might only be able to concentrate for 15 minutes at a time. And then after you've done that a few times, maybe that's okay. Then 30 minutes. And break up your block into different chunks and see how much you can focus and flow on that. Some of you at the beginning, your curve may just look like a series of, you get into the flow and then you just need a quick break. And you pick back up after a few minutes, and maybe you're here and you get in the flow and you need a quick break. And then hopefully over time, when you do this, your curve is going to look a little more sustained. Maybe you can last for a longer period of time, and now you take a break. And then you come back in and you're refreshed and you jump right back into it. And that, it's going to take some time for you to figure out. But you've got to begin practicing this and being acutely aware of how much of this focused deep work am I doing. Deep work can be, I'm talking about deep work is not necessarily a routine task, like maybe you're pipetting stuff. I'm talking about maybe when you really need your critical mental faculties aware. That can be especially around writing, can be around reading, learning new things. It can be around analyzing data and looking for patterns and making meaning of what's in front of you. You guys are going to know for your field what exactly that deep work is that you need to be getting done. Lynn points out here. Lynn, thanks for sharing this with us. Brilliant book. When I say no, I feel guilty about valuing yourself. Yeah, exactly. And I think some people, especially if you have had any degree of imposter syndrome, feel like you might not deserve to be there in the room with the others. It's very, very, very hard to say no. You're going to want to watch some of our training on imposter syndrome, which is going to help you feel more confident. And that in turn is going to help you to be better at saying no and valuing yourself. Sometimes people have difficulty saying no, again, because it's really a desire to please people who are maybe above you in the hierarchy. But you've also got to remember, sometimes those people above you in the hierarchy are pulling you into things that are not for your benefit, but for their benefit. And I see this happen a lot in grad school when people get pulled into projects or working on conferences and other events and things that may help their supervisor and alleviate some of their administrative burden, but don't actually help you take your career further ahead and doing the things that you guys need to do to be the most successful possible. Okay, guys, I think that is some of my main suggestions here for getting into peak productivity. Try these. Really try to notice. Take a reflective process. The next time you have your block of time, I want to make sure you've got your block of time. Try this out. And just try to set a baseline for yourself. I think, I really like data. And I think for yourself, try to notice, try to calculate, what is your attention span? And you may be surprised to realize how easily you get pulled away and how easily your flow gets interrupted, and you get one of these bumps, these hiccups pull you back. You start checking email, and little do you know, 30 minutes have gone by and your block of time is suffering. So I want you to get that baseline and let us know. And see if maybe your baseline is, I can only be indistractable for 5 minutes. That's okay. Don't worry. A lot of people are in that position. But try to extend it, because the truth is, for the vast majority of you, we're not going to be able to invent more hours using that XDS system. You're not going to be able to recuperate that much more time. But your biggest gains in your productivity are going to be had from getting into your peak productivity and getting into flow. Okay, guys, we have some time for more questions. Always welcome some in the group. Does any of this resonate with some of your experiences? If you guys look like this first picture here, what things have you guys done to try to look more like this? For me, this is always something I'm vigilant about and aware of, because I do know that the other things I do in life are all compressing my attention span. So, if I just did nothing and I didn't actively continue to work on this, my attention span would inevitably shrink. Another example of this, somebody told me that the average episode length for Netflix, was an hour, and it's now started to reduce to 20 minutes. And they do this again to keep you kind of hooked with these micro hits and spikes of engagement, energy, even neurotransmitter hits like dopamine hits to keep you going. Which is well and good if you're being marketed to and to sell products, but it's terrible for the kind of deep focus training you need to do research. So turning back to you guys, questions, comments. I'm gonna come back and go on the main screen. Come back over to you. There's sometimes a little bit of a lag here. For those of you who are watching from LinkedIn and YouTube, definitely join our Facebook group, which is where you're going to find a lot of valuable resources that you won't access anywhere else. And you'll get to connect with people who are here sending messages from Facebook. You get to link with others who go through these same common challenges. And it's a place for mutual support and mentorship. And I'm really proud of the results some of our students have been having in just a very short period of time. We have a series of our fall intake into the Fast Track Grad program. Several are on the cusp of publishing within 2 months. And you'll also find a mini course series that's 100% free in the Facebook group that's going to help you go from zero, defining your topic, all the way through to publishing in under 8 weeks. 100% free. You're going to get tremendous value out of that. So yeah, do join our Facebook group. Just keeping Amina, it's great to have you join us. I know you've been going through exploring some different topics with some of the training on topics. Sarah, it's also really nice to have you join as well. Questions, share with us some of your tips on productivity as well. Lynn mentions to us something quite helpful as well, that Lynn says, I diary in work streams, so don't overbook time. Exactly. So that's really a fantastic tip, Lynn, that protecting these blocks, you do want to have a calendar. You do want it to, the night before, set your intention for the day and at least know when your block of time is going to be. Never a to-do list, always a drawer of the day's work. I'm not 100% sure I know what you mean. I actually quite like to-do lists, but there are different philosophies on that. I just find it's very helpful for me to triage and know what the main things are I need to get done in that day and how that fits to my North Star, that one thing I really need to be optimizing over a 3-month period. If you guys want to know about that, if you haven't set your goals of what you want to optimize over the next 3 months to get yourself on the fast track and be successful in your academic research career, there's a great training, the optimization of one, that you're also going to find in the group. Dirk's got a nice question here. Dirk, it's always nice to have people from Bocconi join us on the stream. And you can see Dirk, we can see Dirk because Dirk has given Restream permission to share. So thanks for that. Dirk goes, what's your take on the Pomodoro method with intervals of 25 minutes studying and 5 minutes of breaks? Do you think this is easily integrated in the 2 to 3 hour block of deep studying? I really like the Pomodoro method, and it really overlaps with a lot of what I said. I personally don't use it because I don't need it anymore. And what I don't like about the Pomodoro method is it doesn't always leave you the scope for the kind of growth to get in peak productivity and peak flow. And it kind of ignores some of the things that you need to do in steps 1 and steps 3 of that productivity graph that I was sharing with you. However, I think as a tool for training yourself, I wouldn't start with 25 minutes. I would venture to say many of you will struggle to be indistractable for 25 minutes, and then you're just going to feel bad. So I would actually start light. I would start with 15 minutes with the timer. And if you feel good, start slowly upping that. I do think the breaks are very important. And sometimes people feel guilty, especially if they have their backs against the wall in a panic, a deadline about taking a break. But you will notice that a lot of your creativity comes when you do take a break. So when you're on a walk or you're in the shower or you're playing sports, creativity comes. And it's not that creativity is coming in that moment. It's actually in this deep work period that has kind of planted the seeds of creativity. And when you take an activating break, a lot of creativity is churning, it's your subconscious working. When you take a break, you're actually like allowing your subconscious to breathe and some of those thoughts to enter into your conscious mind to where you can actually grab onto them. So I like to think of breaks in this way, Dirk, as being an activating break. And this can be really helpful. So yeah, I just coming back around to it, I really like trying to integrate this idea of the timer to keep yourself focused with no distractions. But I wouldn't. I just find some students feel bad with this Pomodoro method because society has trained you to have a very short attention span, and you need to fight back against that. And everybody starts at a different point. So I would honestly suggest starting light and then trying to expand from there. But again, it's not a one size fits all. And if you find that this tool helps you, experiment with it and let us know. Let us know. That's what the community is for. We want to know what works for you. Okay, coming back, we had a really helpful point related to Dr. Lynn Armstrong's comment. There's a news article that covers procrastination is an emotional regulation problem and not a time management problem. That's really interesting. I think it's important that you also track your emotional state. And I don't like to put this personally into one bucket or the other, because some people procrastinate and intentionally put things to the last minute because that gives them the impulse and the energy to do things. And for some people, procrastination is actually efficient. For some people, procrastination is putting off something that they don't want to do because it's hard, and they don't feel confident enough that they can actually do it, and it fills them with dread and anxiety to take it on. You've got to know for yourself and really pay attention to your emotional state as a researcher, because too often we focus just on our, we think of ourselves as scientists, as kind of dry, emotionless, we're just doing science. But for you to really fire on all cylinders and hit peak productivity, you've got to have things aligning with your mental state, with your emotional state, with your physical state. And it's really important to, think of yourself as an athlete in a way, except here, you're a mental athlete and you're training these capacities. So really pay attention to your state a lot. I like this comment a lot. To keep my productivity high in deep work, I like to have things like water, fresh fruit, because otherwise I forget to keep myself nourished. 100%. I was just telling myself last night, I was realizing sometimes I get in deep work and I forget to eat. So, I have often carry next to me some water and some dried fruit or nuts or something else that's going to sustain me and keep me going. It's a really good comment. We have Susan, who has a really helpful comment for us. What if you take too long on some tasks for work? Let me see if I can get this here and share it with you. What if you take too long on some tasks for work? How do I say no to myself? I'm in the flow. So that's interesting. So one of the things that can be really hard to do and lead you to feel a sense that you don't have full control is when it's very hard, and this is often something that happens when you're doing new tasks, is difficulty being precise in estimating how much time something will take to do. And I remember in grad school, I consistently got this wrong. Oh, I'll be able to do this really fast. And then hours later, it's like, oof. And then I felt stressed, my back up against the wall. So for you, when you budget time, you kind of want to overestimate, because I tend to find grad students sometimes will underestimate how long things will take. And when you're in flow, again, if you need to get other things done in that period, I like to allocate blocks for deep work. So you want to define what your endpoint is, what you need to get done, and breaking up that mountain so it doesn't feel like that mountain slipping away from you. Mini milestones and tasks along the way to keep you motivated, to keep you focused. And so if you have those mini tasks and milestones, you want to break into smaller chunks those bigger tasks. And ideally, right, you can define an endpoint of where you can stop and then transition to the next task. I intentionally like to, especially if I'm working on papers with co-authors, I like to get to a point where when I turn to take a break, I can pass it off to somebody else. So that product or that paper or piece I'm working on is still getting worked on even when I'm not currently working on it. That may not always be possible, but I really try to keep things moving, to keep things flowing so that I'm not sitting and causing a delay when that project or process could be moving forward, that I'm able to get something off my desk. Somebody else says, I forget to eat as well, Tyrone. Yeah, I'm terrible about this. Really terrible. It's something I've got to work on. Susan, I feel horribly hungry. Yeah, absolutely. So if you know that about yourself, you'll know after a work session, you might just feel more exhausted than you need it to feel. And the problem is when you get into a flow and productivity and you're productive, in most circumstances, you feel really good. You feel it's natural, it's human to want to be productive and do something meaningful. But if you do so in a way that leaves you exhausted, hungry, and tired, you're not exactly going to be excited to go do that the next day. And that's why I say at the end of that work block, you need to start paying attention to your state and make sure you're nourishing yourself. And especially after a hard block of that work, just like an athlete, right? An athlete is not just going to go. They're going to need to take a break to reap the benefits of all the hard work that they've just done. You need to do the same for yourself. Here's a nice comment I really like. I don't like restraining myself to a method. I just focus on getting things done and move on. No break rules. I take whatever I need, just a deadline, and should get it done. It works and it's more comfortable. That's absolutely 100% fantastic. And so, if you're feeling good and you feel like you are you have the time that you need to get things done, that's fantastic. Don't change it. I know for myself personally, I'm always aspiring to be more productive, and I know a lot of people feel like they struggle with deadlines. They struggle to have time for everything. So if you have that, and just looking for who's saying that exactly, that's Amina. That's fantastic. Exactly. 100%. I know other people in the group, haven't been able to do that. Some people get this naturally. Some other people really have to train in focus to get down to that point. I wanted to take a comment from Cornelia here, where let's see if I can find it here. And I'm struggling to see it here. Hang on the chat. Let me do. I can actually overlay the chat, which is kind of cool. Let's see if this shows up. And for some reason, it's not wanting to show up. Okay. Not sure why that is. I'm using a new software here. Some of you were asking why we're not on Zoom at the moment. But Cornelia writes, usually at the end of the block, I note down the last thought I have about the project I work on so that I can come back to it easily for the next day. I really like that. Cornelia, I like that a lot. That's a really nice idea. It's going to help you pick up right where you left off. So you either keep things moving, pass it on to somebody else, or you make it easy and you already start setting yourself up to make it easier to flow into your next block, because a lot of time gets wasted in part one of that stage. So that's really a nice point. Somebody made a nice point I liked here. To-do lists get longer and we pick off the favorite things. Put tasks into A, B, and C drawers. A has got to do today. Yeah, so sometimes people would just pick off the things that are easy to do. Maybe you get into the office and you start writing a whole bunch of emails and doing all sorts of little things that you feel like you're getting stuff done, but you're not really getting the big things done that you need deep work for. And you're giving yourself this false sense when you do that of productivity, because you are doing things, but you're actually using your valuable block on the things that are not the high value things you need to be doing. Save those emails or other things for when you're tired or when you need a break, or things that don't require this kind of deep work, and try to manage that wisely. There's some really good suggestions here. Here's somebody who says, using a timer works for me when I'm doing a long repetitive activity, like scanning thousands of papers for a systematic review. I use a time limit to concentrate for 30 minutes and so forth. Yeah, I think that can be, I actually like sometimes using a timer because I like setting little productivity challenges, especially if there's really boring tasks. I might want to go through and say, okay, here's game with myself, especially if it's a data management task. I want to try to say on a systematic review, I want to try to screen different articles. I'm going to do the authors that start with letter A through letter F, and I'm going to try to get that done in the next hour and really try to get myself in a groove. And it's kind of a productivity mini hack to just keep going. Somebody else says, sometimes I get stuck in terms of being productive because I feel like to be able to continue, I need help from a colleague. If my colleague is busy and I can't continue, I get anxious because I'm not productive and I may have a deadline. How to best manage that? That can be very tricky, and that's a common feeling that I think a lot of grads have in terms of getting the right kind of support that they need from mentors and supervisors. And it can be an incredibly frustrating feeling when you feel stuck and you're not getting the support you need. There's a much bigger conversation to have on that, on how to best engage your supervisors, understanding where your supervisors and co-authors are at, and whether they're capable of giving you the support they need. Because when you really qualify and think about your supervisors, you need to think about, one, are they willing to help you? Sometimes they just don't have the willingness. They just don't care because they have other priorities. It might not even be out of malice or malintent, but they have other things going on. And sometimes it can be they're just not qualified. Maybe they're not capable of helping you with what you need help with. But yeah, that's an incredibly frustrating feeling in being stuck. And ideally, it's nice if you can kind of anticipate where you might get stuck. I know that's really hard to do at the beginning, but if you know something's going to be a challenge to keep you flowing and productive, try to anticipate that in advance, book those meetings, get that time on the calendar, and maybe save that deep work block to where you know you're going to have the support in place to not be stuck with it. I know that's not always possible, but if you are consistently not getting the support you need, then you do need to think about diversifying your support structure and finding others. Here's another one who says, and I think Lynn was really, really right in this, book your colleagues' time. Definitely try to get in on their calendar if you can. And I know some professors are extremely busy. I know personally, my calendar fills up weeks in advance, and this is a reality for a lot of professors. So excellent. Jordan, hey, great to have you join us. You're just catching the tail end of our session here. We've gotten a lot of really good suggestions from the group. The ones really resonating with me at the moment are needing to eat and drink more water, because I've been going through that just this week. I really think finding yourself a good space is really important. A reliable space, if you can. That could be, maybe sharing a co-working space. There are some that are very low cost available now in many cities. Maybe negotiating what you have to do to find a block where you can, a block of your department that can be yours, that you can colonize, or maybe it's a shared space, but you have it regularly for your deep block of work. These things are very, very important for you to do. I find it very hard to do deep work in public spaces, but that's just me personally. I used to try to work in places like Starbucks, and I found I started to go to libraries. And libraries were one of the best places where I trained my ability to do deep work and get productive. And only once I had that capacity really strong that I could keep myself from being distracted, now I can still sort of kind of go back to a Starbucks type setting and get deep work done, but still not as effectively. So if you guys are really training this from the very beginning, I think a library is a fantastic place, because it will force everybody around you to be silent. In theory, not all libraries do. And it's going to deprive you of a lot of the stimulation that, when it gets hard, you might want to turn to and distract yourself with. And regularly, I've seen some of the most productive people I work with share my nerdy affection for libraries as that kind of space. Susan also says, my physiotherapist reminded me that I need to drink more water. Guys, I can't emphasize this enough. Again, if you are not taking care of your body, if you're not taking care if your physical self, is going to spill over and start affecting your mental health. You start affecting your mental health. You're going to get notice dips in your productivity. You're going to feel frustrated by it, and that can put you on a vicious path to a burnout cycle. I want you guys to all really nourish yourselves with food, but also nourish yourself socially. And if you get your productivity right, you're going to open up time uh, for you to have that social life that you need. And hopefully, if you get this right, you won't have to suffer that evil triangle that I suffered as a grad student, where you can only have two of three, right? Social life, sleep, and really good productivity in what you have to do. So, guys, I think this is a great place to stop. Thank you all for joining. I got a lot of value out of hearing some of your suggestions. You can see other people in the group who have been struggling with this. I encourage you to reach out, get in touch with each other, share some of your best tips, help each other get into peak productivity. If you guys found this valuable and helpful, I do offer for everybody in the group the opportunity to meet with me to really take stock of some of the biggest challenges you're facing and connect you to the 100% free resources in the group. If that's something you're interested in, send me a DM and apply for a time with me where we can go deeper and try to troubleshoot some of the challenges you're facing so that you have a smooth, successful ride as a grad student and get on that proverbial fast track. I will look forward to seeing all of you next week. I've been listening to the poll of ideas of things you want to cover, and we are going to do a session on how to streamline research interests into a winning topic. So if some of you guys want to be volunteers for that and share your research interests with me, we will we'll set it up to bring you on camera here with me and set that up as a live session of just exactly how I have done this for decades to help my students consistently get very highly cited papers and get on the fast track, getting really good jobs. Many of my students have gone on. They're now full professors at Oxford, Berkeley, places at London School of Hygiene, Tropical Medicine, all over the world. If that's interesting and you're happy to share and volunteer for the benefit of everybody in this community, please do get in touch with me as well. I will look forward to seeing you guys next Friday. Thanks for joining, and have a great weekend and a refreshing break. Make sure you drink food and water, as Susan reminds us. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.